on, folks? How we doing tonight? Tonight we're on the road to Vegas, and we are gonna be talking with the Minnesota Viking crew tonight. All right, and so tonight we're gonna bring in, since Ali was here first, we're gonna bring him in first, and let's go.
Hey, thanks a lot for having
What's
me.
up, man? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, how long you been a How long you been a Vikings fan?
Since 1996.
Is that the birth year?
No, I was born 86. But yeah,
So it
96 was my
took you
first year
10
as a
years
fan.
to become a fan.
Yep. I guess you can say I was kind of a late bloomer in some ways, but
That's all right.
mhm,
Better than never. Better than
definitely.
never. All right. Well, I thank you for coming on tonight.
So,
Next, we're going to bring on, we'll go with Tyler. Tyler, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. Just enjoying a nice, peaceful evening out here in the suburbs and ready to talk some Vikings.
Right. I see we got some Warren Moon in your background. That's he was a very mobile quarterback. I love that the you've gone to back to the blue over there on the left. Well, my
Mhm.
left, you're right. Um,
Yeah,
Tennessee went
he's
back to those.
yeah,
Go
Tennessee
ahead.
wearing them is a disgrace, and I will say that until the day I die that jersey needs to go back to Houston. But Warren Moon is the reason, one, I'm a football fan, and two, I'm a Vikings fan. So he's got a special place in my football heart.
Sweet, sweet. Warren Moon was always a scary quarterback to watch. Very,
One
very
of the
good.
best,
Very
one of the
mobile.
best and most underrated to ever do it.
Absolutely. All right. Next, we're going to go with Dustin.
What up?
What's going on, sir? How are you?
Not bad. I write for Vikings Territory, and I do a couple different podcasts about the Vikings. I live and breathe this stuff, and I'm anxious to talk to you about it.
Sweet. I'm interested to learn.
All right.
Yes, I am. I am from Pittsburgh originally. I live in West Virginia now. We're like 40 minutes out of Pittsburgh. I might as well tell you my
Mm-hmm.
quick background. But I did grow up a Steelers fan. But
Okay.
it's really hard to just want to talk Steelers all the time. So I kind of outreached my start, and I realized I like talking to people and just finding out about their teams, and that's just the way I feel. I don't know. Well, I thank you two for coming on. We do have more guests to bring on. Next, we're going to go with Moe. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, are you from Minneapolis, Minnesota, or where are you from?
Yeah, so I used to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota until 2019 and started watching Vikings from 2015. So, kind of a newer fan probably among this base. But yeah, I do follow them very passionately and love to watch them. Right now, I'm in Dallas,
Sweet.
Texas. So, joining you guys from there.
Oh, all right. Well, guys, we thought it was hot where we are. He's in Dallas. It's got to be roasting.
Yeah, I just did my walk and, coming back toasted.
Nice, nice. All right. Next we have Mr. Rick Sosa coming on. How are you, sir?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Glad for the invitation and ready to talk some Vikings football.
Sweet, sweet. I'm ready to learn. Like I said earlier, I'm ready to learn about the Vikings. You guys have one of my more favorite lately college kids on your team, and Jordan Addison, obviously. Um, But first, I want to bring on Pat real quick. I signed Lucky Jackson. Me and Pat did a show on the XFL. I wanted to bring him in and let him talk about Lucky Jackson for a minute. As you said backstage, he's got to be up in what 4 hours, 5 hours to get ready for work. I'm sure maybe some of you guys do too. But I'm going to bring Pat on real quick. I don't know if you guys followed any XFL in the spring league or not. I don't know, but I'm going to bring him on real quick, let him talk, and if you guys have any questions, let's do it. Pat.
Hey guys, just perusing through y'all's Twitters, trying to follow y'all, and obviously nice to meet you and everything like that. Was brought on air quote as the resident expert on XFL, USFL, I guess. I mean, everyone's an expert when it comes to the Twitterverse right now. But yeah, we're talking XFL, we're talking USFL right now. The hot topic is Lucky Jackson coming to y'all's team. Obviously, it looks like you lost. No, it looks like Don, big loss there, and someone that I don't think gets talked enough. Obviously, his impact over the last couple of years has decreased. Was Dan Chisnia doing a lot of the gritty work? I know they've tried to have him at safety, but safety a little bit, but also playing a lot that big role in special teams. I don't think he's taken any offensive snaps. I'm not sure. You guys would have to educate me on that.
He might have had one or two in garbage time, but it's been very minimal. He's basically a punt gunner galore.
Yeah, and I mean, I know he I want to say it was 2021. He made a big impact. I believe his rookie year, but the roles kind of decreased for him. That's not your Lucky Jackson type of guy. Lucky Jackson might be able to fit into that role. Comes out of Western Kentucky. He was running anywhere between a high 4.5 and a low 4.6, depending on where you got. He's got some miles on him. That 2020 undrafted free agent after a record-setting career at Western Kentucky. This guy kind of gets lost in the COVID, especially being in a small school. There's not enough pre-workouts. There's not enough rookie camp mini invites, all that goofy stuff. 2021, he finds himself in the spring league with the Blues, I believe, or the Alphas. And, he's pretty dynamic, averaging almost 15 yards a reception, but, just kind of another guy. Nothing too sexy with him. Bounces back and forth in Canada, and it's not until he gets to the XFL in 23 where not only does he go all XFL, but I believe he was like the top 2 PFF guy there. Does all the gritty stuff, can sometimes burn you, find the soft spots in the pocket, averaged about 15 yards per reception. But overall, the biggest knock I have on him is you obviously have Jordan Addison. You have Justin Jefferson. You have KJ Osborne. Now you get into that wide receiver 4. You need to be a little bit more versatile. Who's that guy? And while I think Jackson's a great player and whatnot, he's not really your typical special teams. I'm going to fill a couple of these roles. So it's kind of weird because you get some of these guys who, if they have to go become that wide receiver 3 or 2, they'll put up great stats and they'll look good. But I don't need him to be my wide receiver 2 or 3. I need him to throw those roles, because I don't think many would disagree that Justin Jefferson is one of the best in the Jordan Addison will most likely have every opportunity to be the wide receiver 2. KJ Osborne really came on a lot last year, and then you have TJ Hawkinson, and you kind of have, I know they like Nick Muse a lot as well as a tight end too. So now looking back on all this, where does Lucky Jackson fit? If they like him enough, and maybe Addison regresses, maybe they stash him away on the practice squad. But in the end, that's the thing I try to reiterate to a lot of XFL and USFL fans. Just because they put up those sexy numbers in that league, it's not even a talent thing. It's you're not going to be that guy because you were wide receiver 1. Now you have to be for 4. How are you going to play? That's my spiel on Jackson.
Have you guys seen anything on him in practice?
I mean, I've been able to see much in practice, but they haven't rotated a lot of the back end guys of the on the wide receiver room, because they've been focusing so much on the mid-tier guys like Rager. Naylor, the one day he had a really good practice, but he's been out with a contact leg injury, which to me just screams thigh bruise. But the one question I have with Lucky Jackson is, he obviously, you talked about, you need to be versatile on the back end, and not only do you need to be versatile as a wide receiver 4 or 5, but you got to be a good special teams guy. My question is, when he's on the field, are we looking at him more as a Z and X, a slot? What's his best deployment as far as and what he is going to be able to run on the offensive side of the football. Like Kevin O'Connell likes to really move those guys around. And even if you're like a traditional X, you're going to be playing all over the place to try and create mismatches. And one of the things that he did really well early on is he got Justin Jefferson lined up against like edge rushers and really trying to play into those formations. So what does Jackson bring there? Because I haven't seen a lot of him since he left Western Kentucky.
So I definitely don't think he is going to be lining up against edge rushers because he's about 6 foot, probably 180 pounds. So I don't see him actually able to put up much of a challenge on that. But as far as playing that true, I want to say that true slot, because when we think of a true slot, we think of someone who's 5'10" and below. But he could probably play all 3 positions and whatnot. I kind of look him as like a less in the NFL, kind of a less sexy version of KJ Osborne. He'll be able to stretch the field sometimes, but he'll be finding a lot of these pockets and kind of getting open in that way. Biggest thing from the 2022 season or 23 season is that he had 0 drops on, like, he's very short-handed. I think he had 51 targets and wrote it down, 37 receptions on 51 targets and no drops. So I don't see him actually being able to, stand up against the edge rushers and whatnot. I could see him getting bullied in the inside a little bit just because that's the biggest, like, in my opinion, one of the hardest things for receivers to translate, like when they're actually playing receiver from an alt league, is the bully, like, the lack of a better term, the actual bulliness of some of these physical cornerbacks and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, this is big boy rules. You're not going against, a cornerback 4 or 5 and whatnot. I could see him getting bullied on that, but if, he's able to kind of manipulate that, get a little stronger, get a little bit more confident in the system, might be able to put some decent games together. Kind of, I could see him going on a run like, you guys remember Kiki Katu? He played on the Texans in 20. Yeah, he had like that stretch of like 3 or 4 good games. I could see that being kind of his MO, but Kiki's not in the NFL anymore because he can't play special teams.
What about can he return punts?
He didn't do it this year, I believe, but if I could pull up the numbers, I believe he did some college, but it wasn't his like big thing because he exploded his last 2 years in Western Kentucky, and that's when he broke all those records and whatnot. I think he returned some kicks in the XFL, but it wasn't his like main bread and butter because it was Chris Blair and him dominating at that wide receiver 1 and 2. So I mean, I personally feel like didn't you guys have Rager returning kicks, and then they have a pro?
Yeah,
I feel
just
like what's up?
It was just
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're gonna have pro. Yeah, I re-pulled up his stats this year that he didn't have any. Like, I think he was back there, but he didn't have any returns this year. So he's not like that special teams guy. He has the danger to fall into. You guys remember Cam Phillips?
Yep.
So you know how Cam Phillips exploded in the XFL, started out real hot in college and whatnot, never had to play kickoff, and that's why he's not in the NFL. Has a nice career in Canada. That's pretty much another comparison as well.
Yeah, I see the Vikings 4th receiver. Looks like it's going to be Jalen Naylor, but I mean, we'll see. He's having a pretty good camp. We saw just a little bit of him last year, but he was showing some flashes. We'll see if he keeps it up this year.
I mean, if you go, the problem is how much familiarity do you have and whatnot? Like, every player is an obvious investment and whatnot. And, with this regime, because Naylor's a 22 draft pick, correct?
Yeah, 6th round.
I mean, it's a 6th round pick, but you don't want to be wrong. Regardless, all GMs think the same. That's O'Connell's guy. That's a guy he wanted and whatnot. Lucky Jackson is just a dude that might be filling a roster spot they view, and if he turns out to be better, great. If not, that's my opinion. And that's just that's over any personnel and whatnot.
Anything else, guys?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the insight.
And as for Kyle Curtin out there on the YouTube, give us Rick. I don't know what happened to Rick. He's not backstage. Look like I don't. I just messaged him on Twitter to see what's going on. So Cal, hopefully he comes back.
What do you guys, Jackson? Like, or do you think he makes the top 6? Like, I don't personally.
Yeah, I don't think he makes a team.
No, the coolest part about his addition was his name right away, because it was kind of in a dead zone spot on the calendar. Like, they got a dude named Lucky Jackson. But from head to toe, from Jefferson, Addison, Osborne, Rager, if he makes the team, Naylor, Brandon Powell, who's a Kevin O'Connell carryover kind of. I would think a practice squad ceiling. I would be willing to bet that every person on this panel who has a 53-man roster projection doesn't have Jackson making the cut, unless he just does something glorious here in the next 2 weeks or even in the preseason. But yeah, I think we all have him hoping, cheering for him to be a practice squad type of dude.
Yeah, I think they go Prohl over him.
Mm-hmm.
Prohl's been there for a while, so it's,
those last 2 to 3 spots are honestly up in the air. I thought Malik Knowles was going to get one of them because of his special teams utility and multiple return touchdowns at Kansas State, but a PCL injury kept him from testing, which he would have been able to run in the low 4.4s or maybe even the high 4.3s, and he ended up on the NFI list reserve, so he's out for it's either 6 weeks or a year. I can't remember how those segment off, but it's going to be a crapshoot because Tristan Jackson almost made the team last year as that last receiver, and then Jalen Reagor, he was thought to be done, and he's having a good camp. Maybe he's finally figuring it out. It's going to be an interesting battle for those last 3 spots. Naylor's pretty much got one in the bag unless he completely is catastrophic, but it'll be a fun battle.
Do you think there's any they keep 4 tight ends?
I think they probably will keep 4 tight ends because they're going to try and really utilize 12 personnel, and they want to attack down the field with that, and they want to go from more the McVay concepts to more Shanahan concepts, and the addition of Josh Oliver, blocking tight end for the Ravens, but he came out of San Jose State as a pass catcher only. He was a specialist. So now that he's kind of developed both elements of his game, and now you can utilize him, kind of like how the 49ers back in the day had Vernon Davis and then Delaney Walker before he went over to Tennessee and became a really big player. I think that's kind of their idea. And then that can, in theory, open things up for Justin Jefferson, because now all of a sudden you have 2 tight ends you got to worry about. Well, are you going to be in base? Are you going to be in nickel? And then that's when the running game kicks in and everything kind of revolves around that. So I think 4 tight ends is likely, but they also could just keep 2 tight ends on the practice squad and bring them up. They did that a little bit last year before the Irv Smith Jr. injury, and then they ended up acquiring Hawkinson.
Yeah, speaking of Josh Oliver, just like most Vikings fans, when they signed him, I was like, wait, why they sign a tight end? But then I started to open up to him more. I mean, I can see him being a good addition to this offense.
I evaluated that as a market inefficiency, where if you look at wide receiver 2s, they're making between $11 and $20 million, depending on how you view some guys. Like, I don't view DJ Moore as a wide receiver 1. I think he's just a guy as a wide receiver 1, but he's a really good number 2. And guys in free agency, like in 2022, were getting $15 million. This year, the market calmed down. Guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, and we were getting $11 million. Well, Josh Oliver is a $7 million average annual value. He's probably not seeing the last year of his contract unless he just absolutely balls out. So in theory, it's like a 2-year deal with a max cash output of $10.5 million. And that is if you can get him to a point where he's catching 30 to 40 balls a year and utilizing him to attack the seams, similar to how you'd pay an expensive wide receiver 2, that can be that market inefficiency, because tight ends, like Travis Kelce's worth more than $14 million. And Josh Oliver's probably going to play more than that $7 million average annual value he's getting, even though the cash flow is not matching it at this point. So I think that's the idea. It's a unique twist on the Moneyball approach.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously this is y'all's team, and I cover all of these different alternative leagues and start to get to know the NFL teams based off where the alt league goes, and then I start deep diving into whichever flavor of the week I have. But I mean, football is football, and a lot of the stuff you were saying, obviously, bring in the nonsense of all these markets with the over evaluations and under evaluations and whatnot. I don't know. But I do know one thing is that obviously you guys have that dynamic between your tight end with Hawkinson, and anytime you can have a guy like Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson. I think KJ Osborne had some of the best dynamic performances in 2022 last year that don't get talked about enough. As I'm just watching like the quarterback Netflix series. I mean, at this point, you could throw anyone in to that tight end too, and they're going to eat. And when you look up, you could see one of these guys. Well, I would say between two, because Johnny Munt's a athletic offensive tackle at this point. But you see, Josh Oliver or Nick Muse end the season with 55 touches, 600 yards, and 9 touchdowns, and be like, oh, where did that come from? It wouldn't surprise me personally. So. But, yeah.
All righty.
So.
Yeah, speaking of TJ Hawkinson, yeah, we'll be interested to see if he gets extended within the next 2-3 weeks.
Is this his 5th year? Is it 4th year?
5th year.
Definitely, I don't know. We'll see what happens. He's definitely, he's one of my favorite players to watch on y'all's team. Very what Troy Reader is going to do. I think he'll be cut, probably be in the XFL pretty soon.
Well, here's the thing with Reader. There's a non-zero chance he could end up a starter because the interior linebacker group is Brian Asamoah, who's a big question mark, Jordan Hicks, who's also a big question mark, and then nothing. They brought in 3 UDFAs to potentially make the roster. Troy Dye looked to be a potential player, but he weighs 225 pounds and he doesn't run like it. And he's honestly a special teams guy only at this point. So if Asamoah struggles or Jordan Hicks collapses because he's getting up there in age, entering his 9th season out of Texas, Reader could end up starting multiple games this season. That's kind of the wild thing.
Yeah. Yep. Jordan Hicks did come back on a pay cut, but yeah, I didn't expect him to be back at all. I was surprised they brought him back, even for the little money they brought him back from. I didn't expect him to be back.
He's a great thumper in the running game, and that's how they're going to utilize him. He's going to be a gap filler, and now that they're going to move Kyrus Tonga into that nose tackle spot, he's going to be able to 2-gap. So then you've got Asamoah, who's basically just a firecracker, who's going to be able to just explode through holes and be able to make plays. You can just hone that aggressiveness. And then Hicks isn't super aggressive, but he's very smart, and he knows how to shed blocks and be able to attack in the running game. And I think that element is something that Brian Flores really wants. Something like when you look back at all those Patriots defenses, what linebackers were really good in the running game, but they weren't super versatile. I think that's the role Hicks is going to fill.
Yeah, I mean Jordan Hicks. I mean, those are those 2 down backers you always think of, like you say, Gerard Mayo, Brendan Spikes. I mean, Brewski wasn't the best. Who else did they have for a little bit? Junior Seau, towards the end of his career, could only play 2 downs. So, I mean, didn't they have – well, Dallas Thomas was an outside linebacker, correct? He didn't really play the Mike or the Will that much.
They wanted him to be like a rover. They wanted him because he had the size, but just freaky athleticism and speed, and they just couldn't figure it out with him. And I think he just kind of collapsed off of a cliff. I feel like early career Dante Hightower is kind of the comp for what Jordan Hicks is going to be, because they didn't have Hightower doing a lot of crazy stuff early. He was a middle linebacker. And then as his career grew, they asked him to do a lot more things. They asked him to stand up in the middle of the A gap. They had him rushing off the edge. They had him just doing a myriad of different things. And I think early career Hightower is probably the best comparison to what Hicks is going to be.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate talking shop with y'all. I'm going to go take a nap for a little bit. And then, I followed you guys on the social media. So, good luck to y'all with the season and everything like that. Much love. And appreciate you guys letting me talk about, some of these XFL guys who, I don't know, maybe we'll do this in week 14 after Lucky Jackson gets re-signed to the squad. It's ridiculous.
I think we'd all be happy if he ended up balling out.
Yeah. It'd be funny though. It'd be more of an ego boost for me, because I'd be like, can't cover a kick, but can't do that. But we'll see what happens. So.
Pat, thanks for coming on, man.
On then, have a great night.
Get some nap. All right, guys. Cal out there saying it's a shame Rick's gone, but this Tyler guy is killing it.
Well, thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that.
My computer's going really slow. Like I hit the button to call this. There it is. All right, guys. So what are we looking forward to this season?
Where do you want to start?
I'd say Brian Flores, defensive coordinator. I mean, Ed Donatel clearly did not work out. I mean, I think this defense, it won't go any higher than 20, but I mean, even if they're just 20th or even 22nd in the league, I mean, that would be pretty big. I mean, last year they were ranked 31st overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yards allowed. Yeah,
that was a disaster.
I guys have a question for you. What really are the upgrades on the defensive side that Vikings has made this year? Like other than the coaching, Brian Flores coming in.
See, they signed cornerback Byron Murphy and then Marcus Davenport. He's coming off half a sack season, but he also dealt with injuries. I mean, if he can return to 2021 form, he'll be a very good addition to this team.
The interesting thing about Davenport is his sack numbers weren't there, but his pressure numbers per rep were better than Danielle Hunter's. They were just outside the top 10 in the NFL. He was getting a pressure at 19.2% of all pass rushes. And sometimes it's not about finishing. You obviously want a guy who can finish, but Danielle Hunter got a lot of grief early on because he wasn't getting sacks, but he finished 8th in the league in pressures with 76. He was consistently impacting the quarterback. And if you can impact the quarterback, that's going to make a big difference. Problem was for the Vikings last year, they couldn't cover because Ed Donatel was just like, hey, run my defense. I don't care what you guys are. Run this defense. And the Vic Fangio defense is great. There's a reason why 12 teams run it. But the problem is his rendition of that defense sucked. It was terrible. And we can all agree with that. It's that the idea of bringing Flores in and he's going to play like Fangio plays cover 3. He doesn't just play quarters, cover 2 and quarter half. He plays cover 3 a good amount. And they do a lot of disguises where they'll show quarters at pre-snap and then they'll bail into cover 3 and vice versa to try and give you different looks. And that's what causes a lot of that confusion. But Flores is going to play a lot of the cover 3 man match, which is, if you can master it, man match is just disgusting. And he's going to suit his defense week to week to the players. And I think that's the most important thing with this team. They have question marks everywhere. I've been comparing this defense to the math problem Damon solved in Good Will Hunting. There's just a lot of variables, and you have to figure out what each variable is. And once you do, this defense could be actually good. You just have to have guys rise up and actually play to the level of their ability. And Flores is going to go 4-3, 3-4, depending on who they're playing, put guys in positions to succeed. And that's not what Ed Donatel did last year. And I think that's why coaching has been the biggest improvement across the majority of Vikings media when it comes to the defense.
Yeah, they basically, for anybody on the defense that was up for contract, free agent, anybody that was even remotely old or expensive, they just said goodbye. And so they're putting all of the eggs in Flores' basket. And if this player was drafted recently, particularly a Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah pick, then that guy's getting promoted or at least battling right now for camp. So I think when Ali said, Brian Flores in the defense, that's a fair thing to look forward to because it's a great unknown. You're wondering, is this even going to work? One of my biggest Vikings deficiencies for predictions was entering the 2020 season and the 2021 season. Like a moron, I said twice, well, this is Zimmer who's coaching the defense, so they're going to be fine. I mean, the bottom they're going to be is average. And both times I made that stupid ass prediction, it was horrible. Like the defense looked clumsy at times because it didn't have the personnel. So I'm paranoid right now that the trust I have in Brian Flores, it's like, well, he's not just going to have an awful defense. I thought that twice and was wrong about Zimmer. So I'm a little bit apprehensive. I was like, is this thing going to really work? But then I rest on some of the statistics that we've been talking about. Was 27th in DVOA, 30th in points allowed. And it would be really weird if Flores would foster a defense that poor. So I'm kind of in agreement. If they can nudge it just to the middle of the league, they already won 13 games with, at the bottom. Sky should be the limit.
I think the only poor defense score very fastly too.
Yeah, the only defense Flores ever ran was year one when ownership was actively trying to tank. The rumor was he was offered $100,000 per loss, and he said no. And they won 5 of their last 8 games after starting 0-8. Like, Flores is going to come out here and he's going to try and do everything he can to win. And I think that's something that, like, Zimmer, great defensive mind, great play caller, but at a certain point, there are some individuals, and he was one of them, the pressure of being a head coach and having to manage both sides, you can lose your fastball. And he did. Like, TJ Watt had 8 sacks, and the Vikings had 51 without Danielle Hunter in 2020. Like, that was 2021. Like, that's not a mistake. They just couldn't do anything else.
I think teams also got a little more familiar with Zimmer too.
One fun fact for the viewers that this will be Brian Flores' first season as a defensive coordinator. You would just kind of assume that he'd done that by now, but he hasn't.
Yeah.
Good old linebacker. He was linebacker coach. He was linebacker coach for the Steelers last year.
Yeah. And technically, he was the DC in 2018. But Bill Belichick, he doesn't like to name offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. It just one of those weird quirks with Belichick. But it's hard to argue his success.
Yeah, one of the players I'm most anxious to watch on the defense is Lewis Cine. I mean, I know he only played special teams before he had that gruesome injury, but it looks like he's having a good camp and he's in year 2. I'm looking forward to seeing who wins the safety spot next to Harrison Smith between him and Cam Bynum.
I was one of my questions: who's going to win that safety spot between those two? Looks like Cine's all over the place though in these practices.
It'll end up being Bynum. He's got the history. He already has the job of being an incumbent. Even with a new defense coordinator, is going to matter a little bit. Plus, Cine they're still trying to ease him back in from that devastating leg injury. One of my writers at Vikings Wire, Kevin Fielder, experienced the same injury, and he's writing about it. He wrote about it last week, talking about just the difficulty to recovery, like just walking, let alone like he was sprinting in 4 months, and that was remarkable. But he's basically a rookie again, and that having to kind of relearn some things and adjust to a completely new defense. He's had some flash plays, but it's not always about the flash. It's about the consistency. And I would assume that you're going to have that Bynum be the starter, and then they're going to rotate Steen in as a projectile missile. And he's going to get plenty of playing time, but I think with this defense, it's going to be more about what the snap share is rather than the starter. I would guess with it by like week 5 or 6, Steen's getting at least 50% of the snaps.
Dustin, does he want to link and join us in the conversation?
He is 6. I would say you give him about 3 or 4 years, he'll be right here with me. Probably more educated than me. Yeah.
He's more than welcome to pop on if he wants. If you want to give up your headband for a minute,
right?
It's always fun to hear everyone's take.
I agree with Tyler in the sense that throughout the early off season, and then even after the draft, I really contemplated like, God, is Cine going to win this damn thing at free safety? And then I think over the last month, I've softened to this approach that there might be a lot of equity between Josh Metellus, Cameron Bynum, and Lewis Cine. Like when you look at the snap counts at the end of the year, I think it might be a crapshoot where it really didn't matter. Maybe a namesake if it's Bynum or it's Metellus who wins the starting free safety job. But based on the way that Flores likes to operate, I don't think they're going to be hamstrung into, well, here's the starting free safety, damn it, and he's going to get the bulk of snaps. I think they enjoy having the versatility of hard hitters, aggressive dudes. So I think there'll be a lot of possessions or plays where you've got a few safeties out there, and it won't be necessarily a pigeonhole to like, well, who's the starting safety?
At the end of the day, yeah, snap share is going to be the king on who's playing well. But I think Flores is not going to be shy in, hey, you're not a great matchup this week, so you're going to get 30% of the snaps instead of your normal 70. Like, there's no ego here. It's going to be what's going to help this team win. He comes from that Belichick tree. He has no problem making noise. He has no problem doing what he thinks is the right thing, whether that be popular or not. And I think that that's going to be a massive benefit to this defense.
Yeah, I'm going to guess.
Has he mentioned anything like that he learned from Tomlin or anything coming from that defensive mind?
He talked a little bit about it, but that was in his opening press conference. I'd have to pull up the transcript to know for sure.
I was just curious, I mean, a lot of people always say how they learned from Tomlin and everything else, so that's why I was asking.
Oh, absolutely. We know he was our defensive coordinator in 2006, and that defense was really, really good, and then he left.
Where'd he go? Tampa after you guys, right?
No, he came from Tampa, and he took over the defense as like a 32-year-old, and then he became the Steelers head coach.
Oh, yeah, 2007 and then 2008 we won. Yeah, anyway.
We remember it vividly because we were, some of us were teenagers, a couple were in our 20s, and we'd much rather have Tomlin just stick around than the dude that we had in Childress.
So he was a good – I just know him as a coach. I never really paid attention to Tomlin before he was the coach. So I know he has a defensive background. I can go back and look at coverage and stuff that he did, but it's a lot better to hear from people on that end of what they saw.
Yeah. He's a Dungy guy, Monty Kiffin disciple. So a lot of the Tampa 2 stuff. Played wide receiver, William and Mary. But the one thing that impressed me the most, he gets to Pittsburgh known for the Blitzburgh style, traditional 3-4, really aggressive. And he just looks at Dick LeBeau and be like, hey, I'll help you out, but I'm not going to change this defense. And then slowly over time, he's integrated a little bit more of what he likes. But he stuck to his word. He never fully changed from what that traditional Pittsburgh Steelers defense was. And I thought that was really impressive.
Oh, yeah. By the way, Adam, I just found Brian Flores quote. He said, "The Rooney family, Mike T. Omar, my time in Pittsburgh was tremendous, although short-lived."
I didn't he kind of disappeared, and we had Matt Canada. That was the big topic. So Flores leaving was like 5 seconds of news, it felt like, compared to everyone wanting Canada gone.
Yeah, I think Mike Tomlin, rightfully so, wanted to make sure that he didn't get Kaepernicked, Brian Flores, that is, and so scooped him up. And he's a brilliant mind, and kept his name relevant for this coaching cycle. And that's the only downside about this Flores hire. If he does transform this thing, even to 13th best defense in the league or something, he's going to be right back on the coaching market, I think. And then we have to kind of deal with what we went with the Mike Zimmer offensive coach. It's always a new guy every year. That's kind of the only down part of having an offense first head coach is you might have a revolving door if the defense is worth a damn.
The one nice part about Flores is he basically turned down the Cardinals job because he just didn't think it was right. And I don't think he's just going to go to a place to get a head coaching job. He wanted to come here, and he may be willing to stay an extra year or two to make sure that he gets that right fit.
I'm paranoid that Belichick's going to boot, and then that job would be too irresistible, I think.
I could see that.
Well, Pat said, thank you guys for having me on. And Cal asked, does Brian mix any 3-and-3 stack in? I would call it up on the screen, guys, but my computer is, I don't know if it's the weather outside or not, but it's coming up really slow on my end. So I don't know what it's coming up on your end. So that's why I didn't call it up. But does Brian mix any 3-and-3 stack in?
I wouldn't be shocked if he threw a little bit in there on occasion. I know a lot of 3-3 stack is going to be more of the college game. You get a lot of teams running the 3-3-5. Gary Patterson, the former TCU head coach, is kind of the pioneer of that, and it's really spread like wildfire because getting athletes in space and being able to do a lot of drop 8. But I don't know how much he's going to utilize 3 linebackers with how porous this linebacker unit is. Now, you may get some 3-3 stack looks where you have safeties as kind of like your Will and your Sam, and then you have like your true middle and Asamoah. But I would guess that you're going to see a lot of unique looks, and the offense has already talked about all throughout camp how this defense is really, really interesting. It's very unique and it's confusing, which all those things at this point in camp is a really good sign. We heard some things last year about the Fangio stuff, but it wasn't on this level and it wasn't like with this much gusto from the offense.
Yeah, and I think Flores did say in this conference that whether he runs more 4-3 or 3-4, it's going to depend a lot upon who the opponent is, which one of the things I'm looking forward to is he's going to mix things up a lot. He's not going to just keep running the same thing, which Donatel looked like he just kept wanting to run the same things over and over.
Yeah, Donatel he was a Fangio disciple. I mean, he was Fangio's cornerbacks coach forever, and he was the Packers defense coordinator with that famed 4th and 26. But he used to run a 4-3, and now he does the 3-4 Fangio stuff. But the problem was he didn't really run the Fangio defense. He ran packages of the Fangio defense and called it the Fangio defense. And that was the biggest issue. And they didn't do enough disguising. They didn't do enough variables with like cover 3. It was quarters, quarter 2, quarter, half, and that was it. And that was the problem. The lack of adjustments, the lack of, hey, we realize our personnel is this. We need to play a little more man, and then we can do like bail technique and cover 3. He just ran what he wanted to out of that package instead of actually utilizing the package.
Were you going to say something, Dust?
No.
Okay, so you guys talked about rotating, possibly snap count for the free safety. Now, what are they going to do with this cornerback 2 situation?
Nobody
Andrew
knows.
Booth, Akaleb Evans, or Juwan Williams?
No, nobody really knows. It seems like Caleb Evans has the inside track right now, but the guy with the most draft capital invested in Andrew Booth Jr. And quite frankly, he's got the most talent in that cornerback room. I was incredibly high on him coming out of Clemson. I thought he could have been a top 15 pick if he would have tested, but he had that sports hernia injury that he got fixed. He played his entire career at Clemson with a sports hernia injury, and he's still able to click and close like a projectile missile. And that was really intriguing. I think he's best in either a straight cover 2 or in man coverage, and that's what Brian Flores is going to be able to utilize a lot. You play that off man in a cover 0, and you read the quarterback well, and you click and close, you can attack that football really well. And that's what Booth is going to be able to bring to the table. But he was a raw prospect coming out, but that high upside was just incredible. Getting him at 42 is a steal, and they moved up for him. And I think Kwesi is going to see this player, and they're going to try and do everything they can to get the most out of him. And I think he's going to be afforded the most chances. But Evans is ready right now. He just doesn't have the highest upside because his athleticism is fine, but his biggest knock is he can't find the football. He's always in position to get the football, but he's always just a split second late to go attack it. And they haven't quite been able to figure that out yet. And that's how most of the completions when he was at Tulsa and Missouri came about in the NFL too. I think you're going to see Juwan Williams get a lot of those reps early because he knows the defense. And it's going to be those 3 guys, Mekhi Blackman. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a lot of rotation with that group like we do with the safeties.
Yeah, speaking of not locating the football, I immediately thought of Chris Cook. That was his biggest issue.
Well, like Evans is always around the football, but he's always just a split second late. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can coach that, and you can be like, okay, because cornerbacks are a lot of times taught to watch the hands, where if once the wide receiver moves their hands, they go attack and they go through them. Well, if the receivers like Chris Olave coming out of Ohio State was phenomenal at bringing his hands up super late. If you bring your hands up late, defender has a lot less time to actually react to you. And a lot of times when you're playing trail technique, you have to react to the hands. You can't turn your head around. Otherwise, you're going to lose too much momentum. He is always right there, but he gets his hands up just a split second late. And if you can fix that with coaching, that split second, that's when you can turn a good cornerback into a great one. But it's yet to be seen if they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a game of inches in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and about Andrew Booth, I was excited to get him too. I know one of the biggest concerns is he's had a lot of concussions already. Didn't he? Did he have a couple last year, or how many did he?
Depends on who you ask. It was either 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think I heard 3. I don't know.
We're talking Evans or Booth?
Booth.
Evans. Oh, Booth. No, Booth had the meniscus. Evans had the concussions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Evans was beset by those, and then and Booth looked flat, not good when he played, and then he was also hurt. But the question about CB2 is so brilliant because they let 5 cornerbacks go this offseason. Patrick Peterson, Duke Shelley, Cameron Dancer, Chris Boyd, and Shannon Sullivan. And to which you say, well, the defense wasn't very good, especially the secondary, so you might as well overhaul. But then you have a new defensive coordinator, so you don't even have any hints on, which guy he's going to go with as the second outside starter. So it's a true crapshoot, and the only thing you can lean on is early indications from training camp, and then you'll be watching in the preseason. But yeah, it's a coin flip because, like Tyler said, Booth should, on paper, he was the crazy second draft pick of his life. That should be the guy they go with. But just because you were drafted in a certain spot doesn't translate to real life on the field activity. Evans looked good for a handful of games. Juwan Williams didn't play at all last year, but he's got the Flores build, big. And then Mekhi Blackman should, by default, get a lot of snaps in the slot. So it's just it's a pick 'em. It's a mystery of, which guy do they trust the most? And we don't have any real hints besides, Juwan Williams in the first week getting run with the first teamers. And then now Evans, because all of those factors are mysterious.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was going to say, yeah. So, I mean, Blackman could end up being a steal. I'm looking forward to seeing if that ends up happening or not. But yeah, just not bringing Duke Shelley back, that was kind of a disappointment.
It could have been that they thought his season was an anomaly. Like, look, $1.3 million is pretty much nothing, but it could have been maybe Flores didn't want to bring him back. Like, there's so many factors that we just don't know, and that's the tough part. I mean, PFF's number 3 cornerback in coverage with a minimum of 20% snap share. Like, that's pretty good, but he is pretty limited at that 5'9" with, I think he's got a 30-inch arm length. Like that, especially when you're playing a lot of like press man, that's an issue.
It will always be strange to me that they allowed him to leave to Las Vegas for $1.3 million, because even if he sucks there, or he would have sucked back with the Vikings, it's not that big of a risk. I think they owed it to him for this sequel to prove if it was lightning in a bottle. But for some damn reason, they just had no interest. To give you an example of how confident I got with the guy on the field, I went to the final game of the year, the Bears game. And when you go to those types of games that are basically meaningless because both teams aren't playing for much, you can get really good seats for cheap. And there was one long ball, I think, that Nathan Peterman threw. And as soon as that ball went up in the air, I saw Shelley down there, and I was like, oh, we're fine because Shelley's down there. And I cannot believe that I didn't. That was a subconscious thought. I saw the ball in the air, and I was like, that'll be incomplete because Shelley's down there. And that's what happened. And so I developed that confidence with him on the field in a matter of about a month or so. And I just, for the life, usually you can kind of predict, no matter the general manager, the coach, how a team is going to act. So when Shelley went to the Raiders, I was like, all right, well, hopefully he got 3 or 4 million, maybe even 5. And I saw 1.3, and it did not make sense one bit, because that was a real low risk to see if that guy flat out just got lucky one season.
Yeah, all right, guys, I have a real quick question. Mm-hmm. I want to know about this jumping interception that was insane that Cal wrote. And for any of my Pittsburgh people watching, any chance we can tell us what we're going to get with Patrick Peterson?
He's so with NFL players, their athleticism starts here, their brain starts here, and then over time it levels out. Well, at a certain point, the brain takes over. The thing with Patrick Peterson is he's still a decent enough athlete because he was just a freakazoid coming out of LSU, ran a 4.3 340, and just had the ability to flip his hips on a dime. He's fine if you get him in the right positions. But if you put him in straight man, if you move him into the slot, he's just going to get torched. And there were times where he was just great, and he's got this really sharp mind where he's able to see what's happening in front of him and be able to attack the football. The game against the Buffalo Bills where he had the game-ending interception, he knew it was going to be a pin concept. So he knew Gabe Davis was going to be running a post. He was able to jump it because he knew that's all Davis was going to be doing in that situation from film. That's what you're getting from an intelligence side, but you're not going to want him manning up against really fast wide receivers. He's not going to be able to flip his hips fast enough anymore. So having him in like a Vic Fangio style defense where you're asking him to do a lot of quarters, you're asking him to do a lot of cover too, that's honestly perfect for him. And I think he's going to be fine. But the fact that he got the 2 years, I thought was a little bit surprising because there's a decent chance that athleticism falls off more of a cliff and you have to move him out to safety. But he's got a brilliant mind, and that's going to help him a lot.
He's a good leader to have too.
He's going to make the team his own and vice versa. From like the moment he became a Viking, it felt like he was a Viking through and through, and that's kind of rare. Like right now, Marcus Davenport signed. He doesn't feel like Mr. Viking. He feels like he's going to be decent and pretty good. But Peterson, because he has that Hall of Fame resume, for some reason has a special way about him that once he signed, especially with the Vikings for his second chapter, now on to his third chapter, I think by the middle of the season, he's going to feel like a Steeler through and through.
Yeah.
Now, what about his jumping interception?
Oh, I'm pretty sure he's talking about the Booth one in college where I think it was against Boston College, and Phil Dracovic threw a corner route, and Booth just basically went up and skied it with one hand. Really impressive stuff, and showed how good his ball skills were. And that's one of the reasons why you get really excited about a guy like Booth, because he flashes so much greatness and potential, but it's the down-to-down consistency where he needs the most work. And we saw that on the field in the just over 100 snaps that he played last year.
All right, the Hunter deal. Did you guys want it to be longer, or was 1 year enough and then figure it out from there?
I'd say 1 year for now and then figure it out after the season.
Everything depends on the structure. If you give him a longer deal, what's that structure look like? I thought he'd get 3 years, $57 million, based on kind of like a historical look at contracts, because he's not getting a second contract. He's getting a third. And the recent track record for third contracts, Chandler Jones got 3 years, 51, and then Von Miller got the 6 for 120, which is basically 3 years, 52. But Hunter's also only 28 getting that second contract. He's not in his 30s. So being that he was playing at this high of a level, and you still in theory have at least 3 to 4 more years of his prime before you really start to see him tail off, I thought that was probably your benchmark. But they needed to do something because they inherited him having signed a bad contract, and this feels more like a good faith deposit, especially with the no tag. And Danielle Hunter said earlier today, he's like, I want to be a Viking forever. And for some guys, you can just be like, you know what, you're just saying that. But when Danielle talks, he doesn't mince words. He just comes off as incredibly sincere and genuine, and he's not trying to lead you astray. You genuinely get the feel that he really does want to be a Viking forever, and giving him this, in theory, a good faith deposit where you give him that raise to honestly true market value for him. I think $20 million, considering all factors, is a very fair price. Then next year makes negotiating a lot easier. And the Vikings organization, the current regime, has done a great job in handling Danielle Hunter's situations, considering what they got left with. They moved a bunch of money up for him last year. They give him a raise this year. Now he's going to be making almost $90 million on a 5-year, $72 million deal. And I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I spent, what was it, back in early June is when Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter, somebody said that there were trade offers that they were listening to, or somebody put it out in the stratosphere that those were a real thing. And I started to wonder, if these are real, we are staring down the barrel of repairing this awful defense per the numbers, and our solution will have been trading Zarius Smith and Danielle Hunter. How is that going to fix anything? I don't care how good Flores is. So I was relieved on Sunday morning when the deal was announced that he reworked and got fairly compensated. But I agree. I would have preferred 3 years and close to that 55, 60 million, because it's not, edge rushers don't usually just die off at age 29. I think he could have sailed through 3 seasons, and then you evaluate, all right, does he still stay? But there's this weird.
You're saying 32, Justin, is whenever they start to fade away a little bit.
They're not quite. Well, it's certainly not like a running back or an off-ball linebacker where you start to get jittery when they hit 30, in my opinion, at least. And so I think the way that they've structured this offseason, it feels like we have this grand climax of 2023 to figure out, all right, can they get to the postseason and do something more than collapse at home to the Giants? And if they can, perhaps they'll explore keeping Kirk Cousins around. But if it's some more bullshit where they just get bounced at home, I think that will be the smoking gun to, alas, go get their quarterback of the future, let Cousins go to the 49ers or Patriots or wherever it is he'll go. And it feels like they're structuring all these deals just to see, all right, well, were we really that good? Let's do it again. And if we were, then we know what we got. Because otherwise, some of these deals, whether it was Byron Murphy's or Marcus Davenport, you would think a couple of them would hit like 3 years and such. But all of them have been like small length, focused on guys that are like 26, 25, and 26. And then the first time in Vikings recent history that Kirk Cousins wasn't extended, it's like they want to see if Kirk gets better with O'Connell. It feels like that because there's no heir apparent on the roster other than Jaron Hall, who feels like a lottery ticket from the 5th round. So to me, it seems like they want to see one more year. We keep saying that every offseason of Cousins to figure out, all right, can he lead us to the promised land?
It's about staying fluid and understanding that, hey, you can't do a full rebuild because of X, Y, and Z, and giving your players opportunities like, okay, if you fall off a cliff, we can get out of this deal. But if you ball out, we can extend you. And that's like the Davenport deal is honestly the perfect example of it. And not tying yourself down when you're trying to rebuild on the fly while staying competitive and trying to win divisions. The short-term deals are honestly great for it. And Zadarius Smith and Josh Oliver really the only 3-year deals that they signed. But Zadarius had a dummy 3rd year, and Josh Oliver kind of does too. So it'll be interesting that dynamic when trying to talk about extensions for Jefferson and Hawkinson right now, and then Christian Darrisaw next year. That's when we're going to see how this rebuild element, where he's talked about it being a competitive one, is really going to come into play.
Do you guys think that this is the new way to do things? 1-year deals?
It's going to work for some people. It's not going to work for others. It honestly depends on what your ownership wants. The Wilfs want to be like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They want to be really competitive every year. And at the end of the day, the most important thing to a lot of these owners is not winning a Lombardi. It's being a great business and being profitable and being successful. Yes, the most success you can have is winning a Lombardi trophy, bringing it home, and you're going to make a ton of extra money from that. But going 3-13 and then 5-12, or I guess 3-14 and 5-13, that doesn't exactly scream, hey, we're successful, we're great. And that's not a great business strategy for some people, because you can lose a lot of season ticket holders. Your merch sales go way down, and trying to stay competitive while rebuilding, it gives you kind of the best of both worlds, because Vikings merch shot through the roof last year because they won 13 games. They keep selling out every single game. And then when fans are happy, they're buying concessions. They're buying that merch. And it all adds up. And being competitive every year is the best business strategy for a lot of these owners. And it's tough for some people to swallow because they want to be able to win the Lombardi every year, and a full teardown to the studs and rebuild it back up can be really appealing, but it's not for everybody.
And you also got to wonder how they would look Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Christian Darrisaw in the face during contract negotiations and say, you know what, we're going to rebuild, but we want you to stay. Because there's this very erroneous thought that when you rebuild, all right, we're going to take a year off suck and we're going to be good. That doesn't usually work that way. Just because it's happened once or twice. Usually if you're going to do the let's be shitty party, you're going to be bad for multiple years and not just one. Unless it's a complete transformational like Bengals situation where you find Joe Burrow. So I think that in unison with never rebuilding, the Vikings never rebuild. They hired a general manager who just so happens to have this competitive rebuild mindset. And I wouldn't, if I was a football player like Justin Jefferson, ready to extend my contract, and they're like, you know what, fella, we're gonna go 3-14 for the next couple of years, and then we hope that your patience will be rewarded. I would say no thanks. And I think that's why he's trying to do both. He even said it. He's trying to live in both worlds to be competitive in the now and in the future. That's the general manager that said it.
I am impressed with your wide receiver core. I mean, you got some pretty quick dudes on both sides of the ball there.
Yeah, the wide receiver core is interesting, and the most intriguing one is probably KJ Osborne because, quite frankly, when you look at him, he's not that talented. But the guy is probably the hardest working guy in the building and has maximized everything he's got. But how much more does he have? And how much more is he going to be able to extract from his limited talent set? Because he wasn't even drafted as a wide receiver. He was announced as a kick returner. And like that's how little the Vikings regime initially thought of his ability as a wide receiver. And he's proved everybody wrong. And he's been a very good football player, but can he become a great football player just based off of his work ethic? And I think that's the biggest question mark is him being able to step into that wide receiver 2 role because it's a lot different than playing wide receiver 3.
Yeah, and during the 2001 training camp, his second year, there's a lot of reports that, he's having a very good camp. And I was like, well, that's nice to hear, but it's going to translate on the field. And he's done pretty well since, and I'm interested to see how he does this year in year 4.
He's earned everything he's gotten.
Dawson, any input on this?
Oh yeah, with Osborne, I regrettably think that this is his last year, and I think he's playing for his next contract. Osborne, that is, because they drafted Jordan Addison, and unless Addison gets more reckless driving citations or flat out sucks, I don't see them having Jefferson at 30 to 35 million per year, and then Osborne back at 11, 12 per year. And then, by the way, we have Addison, who's going to be WR2, and then Jalen Naylor, who everybody loves. So I think, sorry to say, that this is probably Osborne's last year with the Vikings, no matter how well he does. I think Addison's draft was the writing on the wall for that. But, yeah, overall, especially Hawkinson right in the middle, who instantly, like in 4 days, transformed the Vikings offense when he came aboard via trade. So, yeah, I think there's an abundance of pass catchers. It just feels like they're throwing Josh Olive in there just to, rub folks' nose in it. Yeah, it's by far the most exciting part of Vikings football. And it's a familiar thing. The Vikings just have this embarrassment of affluence at wide receiver throughout their history.
And I was going to say one more thing, too, about Dalton Risner. I think he'd be a good signing for this team.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. I had a couple birdies chirp at me before I got on the show that is mostly a done deal.
Breaking news. Oh, man. So who is going to be the right tackle?
Oh, Brian O'Neill.
Yeah.
He'll be fine. Only a
He'll be
partial
all right.
tear of Achilles, which is a lot simpler to come back from than a fully tear. And yeah, he may struggle initially, but because it was only a partial tear, that the repair process is a lot simpler. It's a lot less invasive and a lot less severe. And that all matters because Achilles injuries can just be devastating as far as your explosiveness. And that's really his calling card, is that elite level athleticism. But he's not on the PUP list. He's practicing off to the side. They're easing him back in. I think he's going to be just fine.
I thought you said it was on the PUP list.
No, he's not.
Mm-mm.
On ESPN, it said it was.
No, O'Neill's not on the PUP list.
Okay, all right.
He's not practicing with the team. He's practicing off to the side. But if you're on the PUP list, you can't practice.
Okay, all right. So ESPN's wrong. That's because they laid everyone off. No one knows what's going on.
Yep. Well, Kevin Seifert's pretty good on the beat, but he doesn't control everything on the back end.
Gotcha. What's going on in this running back situation? How did you guys feel with the loss of Dalvin Cook, or did you guys feel it was time for him to go?
I thought it was time for him to go. I think his best days are behind him.
Yeah, same. His underlying metrics were abysmal last year. Only 4.4 yards per carry. He had a couple really big runs, and he still has the capability of that. But it's the down-to-down consistency where he just wasn't the same player as he was in prior years. And with how inflated the contract was, it was just time. And it's hard to let a guy like that go. We dealt with that with Adrian Peterson, and then Dalvin Cook just came in right after him. But at a certain point, you have to say goodbye, and it just ended up being his time.
Yeah, I think all of us on the panel we just kind of gradually knew that when the offseason started, that Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Eric Kendricks were going to be gone because of their contracts. So Dalvin Cook's largest sin was the $14.1 million cap hit he was scheduled to inflict against the Vikings books. And there's just no room for that, whether you have a Moneyball general manager in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah or you don't. That's too rich. We've seen it in living color the last 2 weeks. And I think it was a no-brainer that he was going to not be a part of this roster. It was surprising to see Alexander Mattison come back because a lot of us thought that he would go try to contend for RB1 carries elsewhere. But he's back on a relatively affordable deal. I think Dalvin Cook his biggest calling card was those home run balls, those touchdowns that Tyler talked about. He single-handedly shifted the momentum of 4 different Vikings games, which is the difference in a 13-4 record and my goodness, what is that, 9-8. And so I think it's a testament to Cook that he still had that leadership to put the team on his back against the Bills, the Commanders, the Colts, and the Dolphins. But it's kind of the problem is if that's really all you're doing, you're just kind of a run-of-the-mill back at $14.1 million, and all the other times you saw a modern type of offensive thinker in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah kind of wrap his arms around what we think will be more of a committee approach.
Yeah, and Cook had that long TD run.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, Cook had that long TD run at Buffalo, at Miami. Then he had that screen pass touchdown against the Colts. But yeah, just overall, he just didn't look like the same player. You can just see he was just declining. I mean, yeah, those 3 runs were amazing, but just outside of that, he just didn't look like that same player that we saw the last 5 years.
And none of us will say that he's going to go to the Jets or the Patriots, the Dolphins, and play poorly. No, I think he'll be pretty good. But at $14.1 million, he emphatically wasn't worth the cap hit.
So he's not worth that kind of money right now.
No, I wouldn't have given him an $8 million cap hit.
This guy's a first-round draft pick almost every year in fantasy football.
Fantasy and reality when it comes to team building, that's the major disconnect.
Yeah, and I was going to mention about Dwayne McBride too. I know he was a 7th-round pick, but maybe he could get a decent amount of carries this year.
He's got to prove he can have utility on 3rd down in the passing game, and we just don't know if he can because UAB never asked him to do it. 5 catches on 9 targets for 25 yards in his 3 years there. They didn't ask him to do any of that. They asked him to run like he was in a car wreck, and he was phenomenal at it. I don't think there's anybody in college football who is better at just purely running the football and being able to run through contact than Dwayne McBride. But he had a couple good reps, it looked like, in camp today, catching the football. And if he can show any of that, there's a non-zero chance he could be RB1 by the end of the year because he's that good on 1st and 2nd downs. But he didn't get a chance to show anybody anything because he had a hamstring injury during the combine and then the pro day. So there were no testing numbers on him. So you didn't know what kind of athlete he was. So big time steal for the Vikings there.
I drafted him in my sleeper in my dynasty league. So he will be either on the taxi squad or in the lineup. So
there we go.
I had some questions for myself on that guy. That's why I was bringing him up.
No, that's all right. I think when you asked the question about Dalvin Cook, when we just rattle off Alexander Mattison, Dwayne McBride, Ty Chandler, Kane Nwangwu, it was a crowded house, and there was no reason whatsoever to keep Cook around, who's going to be, 28 next month. And that kind of start is the start of the burial age for running back. So they just had too many mouths to feed, and the writing absolutely was on the wall when they drafted McBride, even if it was a 7th rounder.
I think Jordan Addison's going to be your wide receiver too, though, and they're going to keep Osborne in the slot. That's an outsider's approach, but that's just an outsider. You guys are saying that there's going to be a battle for that wide receiver too.
I'd be careful because they love Osborne and he's got the work ethic. And I think Addison, and when they're doing a lot of 12 personnel, it's going to be Osborne, not Addison in those spots, at least for the first few weeks. And we'll see how things evolve. But I'd be careful putting too much stock into Addison right away from a fantasy perspective, because
no, that wasn't fantasy. That was just dangerous wide receivers on both sides of the coin, and then you put Osborne in the middle with Hawkinson. I think you guys could be very dangerous.
Yeah, it's wealth of riches at wide receiver for this team consistently.
Now, I also did Green Bay last night, and they're thinking that this game is going to be very high scoring. It's not going to be low key. I don't
Viking
know.
Packer games are weird. They're sometimes really high scoring. Sometimes they're ties. I was at the tie in Green Bay back in 2018.
It's
they're
weird being in a tie, ain't it?
It was very the vibe leaving the stadium was just weird. I mean, I was wearing Vikings gear in Packer country, but everybody, all the Packer fans could complain about was the roughing the passer call on Clay Matthews in that game, and it was hilarious listening to that. I'm like, it was roughing the passer. Just deal with it. You're fine. You didn't lose. The kicker lost it for the Vikings. We've been used to that for years, but yeah, it's
of course. We never saw Daniel Carlson again in a Vikings uniform. He's been a stud for the Raiders since.
I guess that was my last battle. Is the kicking game Joseph or Podlensky?
Podlesny kicked for Georgia last year. It's going to be a battle. Matt Daniels confirmed it, which is funny because they guaranteed Greg Joseph $1.75 million to come back on a 1-year deal. But kickers are weird, man. If one guy's really good and one guy stinks, you go with the good guy.
Yeah, that was one of the takeaways from the first week of Vikings training camp, was that from the lips of the special teams coach coordinator, Matt Daniels, he said, we're having a kicking competition. And sometimes when you bring in some unknown kicker, relatively speaking, you're not sure if it's for show, just to keep the heat on. But last year they did the same thing at punter with some guy nobody had ever heard of named Ryan Wright and the incumbent Jordan Berry. And it was all right, what are they doing here? And then I'll be damned if Ryan Wright didn't win that and became a top 10, top 12 NFL punter. And Matt Daniels even invoked that example when he talked about the kicker battle last week. So that leads me to believe that, I think I tweeted this earlier today, that if I would have said to you that Jack Podlesny is going to be the kicker for the Vikings a week ago, that would have been a hot take. But now with those musings from Daniels, it's well, they did this last year and they already proved that they've got the gumption to go with the UDFA. So Greg Joseph had one major problem last year, and it was that, he was wonderful at the game on the line, cold-blooded, if you will. But other than that, he was either average or bad. He didn't hit extra points. Vikings kickers can never consistently convert on extra points. And then just ordinary field goals, it was wishy-washy. When the game was on the line, you could trust him. He hit 5 game-winning field goals in a single season. So for most of us that have a lot of skeletons in our closet regarding kickers, we're we'll take it. We're fine. We'll take that. But it seems like perhaps they're interested in finding a guy who can do both, which is be good in the middle of the game and also be good at the end of game. So if we would have recorded this show a week or two ago, I would have said that Joseph certainly has the advantage. But right now, I'd say it's a true coin flip based on how they did business at punter at last year's camp.
Yeah, that 61-yarder against the Giants, that was unreal.
It sure was.
Moe, do you want to ask your final question before you get out of here? And then Tyler, I just saw you got to go too. But can we get Moe's question, then Tyler, and then we'll wrap things up? You can just fill us in where you guys think we're going to finish, and will they possibly be a front runner to end up at the stadium behind us in the screen?
Hey, thanks for letting me ask my question. I posted on the chat as well. So while we have to see how the defense does with Brian Flores, and we have to wait and watch. There are some upgrades as you guys mentioned, and hopefully the scheme that Brian brings in helps the defense for our team. So I still feel that Kirk is pretty central to this team, and a lot depends on the offense and Kirk's shoulders, how he does. So what are your thoughts? He needs some sort of constant validation, and definitely KOC helped him a little bit on that mental front last year. I feel that a few of the players in the team were also responsible for his transformation last year a bit, where he felt more confident of his abilities. Players like Patrick Peterson, Cook. I was curious to understand what are your thoughts, who are going to be some of those key players in the team this time, with Patrick Peterson gone and Cook gone, who would give Kirk that confidence and that validation, on more on the mental side of it.
That's interesting because a lot of the Vikings leaders are relatively quiet. Daniil Hunter, Harrison Smith, are more lead by example guys than hype up guys. So kind of looking at it, I could see Jefferson being that guy. I could see maybe a Christian Darrisaw. And I think one of the big things with this team is Kevin O'Connell's just like, remember in middle school, everybody's like, oh, embrace everyone. You know, when you're talking about differences, like we're all kids, like just be accepting. And I think that was kind of the big thing last year where I think Kirk Cousins felt stifled under Mike Zimmer because Zimmer was such a hard ass. And there are levels where being a hard ass works really well, but it doesn't work for everybody. And at a certain point, when things start going bad, things go bad. And last year, O'Connell just really let Kirk be himself, and the team embraced Kirk just being himself. He's a dorky middle 30s dad who likes to hang out with his kids and his wife. And there is nothing wrong with that. And the team embraced it. They did the Kirk O'Chains thing, and they just let him have fun. And I think that fun with the team really helped them bring them together. And I don't necessarily know if you need anybody pumping him up. I think that kind of camaraderie is just going to stay around and be a constant for this team.
I sure hope to see that.
Yeah, when the Vikings lost to the Giants in January, I was ready to be done with the Cousins thing, let him go do his thing elsewhere, and the Vikings go with their quarterback of the future. Because we've seen this for 5 years now. This isn't a short sample size. Now we're going into year 6. And eventually, whether you're a manager at your job or you're just doing life things in general, you got to switch things up if something isn't working. But they've opted to go with Cousins again. And I guess you have to hold out hope that Kevin O'Connell helped orchestrate a offense that won a Super Bowl 2 years ago. And I guess the mentality might be if Stafford can do it, then why can't Kirk? Of course, the Rams had a more star-studded roster. So I think they're holding out hope that even at age 35, Cousins can do the thing. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it with this roster. But I don't think that he needs any additional motivation or anybody chirping in his ear. The guy's had a summer of a lifetime. He became a star on Netflix out of nowhere. NFL top 100 players just named him the 42nd best player in football, better than Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson. It's like, what are we doing here? So I think he's got I think if you had a scientific poll, his approval rating would be at an all-time high right now. So he's got a lot of momentum. But I think the biggest dynamic about the eternal Cousins debate right now is age. Before this offseason, you never really had to worry about 33-year-old Kirk or 34-year-old Kirk. But now he's 35, and if he stays longer, it'll be 36 or 37. And we always kind of assume now that because Tom Brady or LeBron James are playing forever that, oh yeah, the guys are going to do this now. No, those are really just the great guys that play that long. So in terms of the leadership, I think Cousins will be fine, and it's just whether or not this defense that we talked about can support them and get them beyond the first round of the postseason.
Any thoughts, Al?
No, but I was going to say, I mean, I know Kirk's getting older, but I think he's going to really benefit from having the same play callers 2 years in a row. He hasn't had that happen since he joined the Vikings.
Yeah, it's going to be huge.
All right. So what are your guys? I know. We got a lot of goers right now. What are your thoughts on the season? What's the record? Or are we not ready to go there yet?
I'm going to wrap it up. I think they'll be 10-7. I think Detroit wins the division at 11-6. Honestly,
it's a range. The Vikings are going to floor out.
Judon today, huh?
The Vikings are going to floor out at 7-10, and they're going to ceiling at 11-6. That's the range. They're too good to be actually bad without just devastating injuries across the board. But I just think with the schedule, they're not good enough to be actually really good. I think they're going to probably win the division or at least contend with the Lions. I'm very bullish on the Lions. I love Dan Campbell, and he gets the most out of all of his players, and now they're getting this massive influx of talent over the last couple of draft classes. And I think this could be finally the year where they break through. But the Vikings are going to contend for this division, and there's a high likelihood that they win it. After that, Yeah, you get in the dance, you would see what happens.
I'm at 11-6. That was my prediction last year, and they surprised even me at 13-4. I don't think the Packers are dead yet. I think the Packers are going to finish in second, right around 10-6 or so. And the Lions, they got to prove it to me. I just don't understand how a team that, even when they got good last year, their defense still sucked. Nobody cared. They kept the same defensive coordinator, added a couple pieces in Cameron Sutton and CJ Johnson. And I think this is just because I've been a Vikings fan since 1996, that the Lions have always been the little brother. And I'm not worried about them yet. I probably should be. And then I have the Bears probably in 6-11, 7-10, which would be pretty nice improvement for them.
Moe, any thoughts?
That's it. Yeah,
I
thanks
got
a
to
lot,
look
bro.
at the schedule really closely to give some thoughts. Maybe next time.
All right. Well, hey guys, how do they get a hold of you? And we're gonna wrap things up. Dustin, I want to do a kid show. I think your kid's ready, man. He's breaking into the scene real quick.
All right. Well, you jot my name down. We'll get him on the show here. I'm Dustin Baker. You can find me at Dust Baker on Twitter. And I appreciate the time and being able to chat with you fellas tonight.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely
fun.
You can find me on Twitter at The Real Forno. I'm the managing editor of USA Today's Vikings Wire, host of The Real Forno Show on Vikings First and Skull YouTube channel podcast network, along with Purple Daily on Draft with Score North. And yeah, and I also do some college football writing for College Football Network. I basically work myself to the bone, and I love every second of it.
Yeah, and I write for Vikings Territory.
What's that?
I write for Vikings Territory.
Nice. Well, guys, I am thankful for everyone stopping on. I love learning, and that's why I do this. You know, like I said in the beginning of the show, I couldn't just stick to one team. I got to learn about them all. But this is not easy doing. I'm not gonna lie. When you don't have the help and you're doing it all yourself, it's not always easy. I wish Rick would have jumped back on, but I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's odd. All right, man. Well, you hit us up next time when you want to talk about the purple team. All right.
I will. I have yous all in the chat, so we are good. Maybe we'll rebind in the middle of the season, see how we're doing. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
Sounds great.
All
Take
right.
it easy.
All right.
I thank you guys for coming on, and
Thank you.
everyone that was in the comments. I thank you. Hold on, wait. Okay. Hey, I am Sports Talking It. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me there. That's Sports Talking It. You can find me at Driving to the Top on YouTube and Twitter. And Pac-Man's going off in the background. And everybody, thank you for tuning in and have a good night.